Continuation and concluding. Part of the story. The Poisoned Escape, a true horror story of guilt, haunting, and survival. Enjoy. That night she meets someone new at a cafe with big windows. His name is Aaron. He teaches 4th grade and laughs at his own jokes. The cafe is crowded and loud. In the safe way crowds are loud. They talk about favourite books from when they were kids. She says she likes stories where the hero is smaller than the problem and wins anyway. He nods and says he liked those too. For most of the time, the overlay does not come. Then it tries, quick and thin, like an old film played over a new one. She feels her chest get tight. She takes a sip of water. I'm going to head out, she says. Early morning tomorrow. He says, no problem. Thanks for meeting me. He means it. She pays for her tea and walks home under streetlights that hum. Days start to stack in a better way. She buys flowers from a stand near the subway and puts them in a glass jar on her table. She throws away the jar when the water gets cloudy and buys another the next week. She cleans the sink. She calls her mother and talks about nothing important. Nothing important is nice. A friend from work asks if she wants to try a weekend pottery class. She says yes and sits at a wheel spinning mud into bowls that wobble and then grow steady. The teacher says, hands gentle, pressure even, and somehow the advice works for more than clay. She takes home a crooked bowl and loves it. The neighbour with the bagels moves. A small sign appears on his door one morning and is gone by evening. The elevator is quieter. The deli door opens for new people. For a week, she still looks over her shoulder without needing to. On the 8th day, she forgets to look. The forgetting feels like a gift. At the office, a new account brings late nights and too much pizza. The team laughs at the same bad joke and keeps working anyway. Emily writes headlines that say simple, honest things. The client nods. The team claps at the small win low. Odd and happy for 2 minutes, then goes back to their desks. Her therapist asks what victory looks like. Emily says, a day that begins and ends in my own voice. The therapist writes that down. Simple words, steady weight. The phone stays quiet for a while. No unknown numbers, no strange photos. She stops checking it every 5 minutes. At night, she turns it face down and reads 2 pages of a book before sleep. Some nights, the book is boring. Boring has become beautiful. A final test arrives without warning. The subway slows between stations and the windows turn to mirrors. For a breath, the glass catches the shape of a face she once knew. It is the old trick again. The old script trying to turn itself into truth. She studies the reflection like it belongs to a stranger. It slides away when the train moves. She does not clutch the seat. She does not close her eyes. She looks at the map over the door and gets ready for her stop. The train opens. She stands. She leaves because it is time, not because she is running. She goes home the long way. The grocery is still open. She buys a lemon and a handful of parsley because the cookbook says both can make a small dinner taste brighter. The person at the register smiles without asking for anything more. The apartment door opens on the first try. She sets the lemon on the table like a bright dot on a map. The buzzer does not ring that night. The phone stays quiet. The clock on the wall makes even sounds. She takes out her notebook and draws 2 columns, like the therapist asked months ago. On the left she writes, what happened then? And under it she writes, a kitchen in Chicago. On the right she writes, what happens now? And under it she writes, I make tea, I sleep, I choose. She leaves the notebook open and lets the ink dry on its own. She turns off the lights. The city hums. Somewhere a siren starts and fades. She sleeps with Hout pictures. At 6:12 a.m. her phone lights up in the grey morning. A new message from an unknown number waits on the screen. Only 4 words. Are you awake, Emily? No name, no photo, just the question hanging in the room. She looks at the message. She looks at her rules on the fridge. The kettle is on the stove empty and light in her hand. She does not answer, not yet. Public records confirm Emily's relocation, a modest walk-up in Brooklyn, 2nd floor, rent paid 6 months in advance. Neighbours remember a quiet tenant who kept to herself, polite but reserved. She was often seen leaving with headphones on, avoiding eye contact. Inside her apartment, routines stabilised, early runs, carefully packed lunches, evenings lit by a single lamp. For a while, the ordinariness seemed to hold. But surveillance in the ordinary can still reveal the cracks. Phone logs show blocked numbers reappearing under different IDs. Each message followed the same pattern. A simple greeting, always at night, always in the same voice Emily swore she had left behind. When investigators later reviewed the texts, most were deleted, but one remained in a backup file. "I miss the tea, don't you?" Co-workers noticed her tension. During client meetings, her gaze would sometimes drift to reflections in glass walls, her posture stiffening as though she saw more than what was there. When asked, she brushed it off. Just tired. Long week. The official HR files describe her as competent but withdrawn from social culture. She declined after-work drinks, skipped holiday parties, citing errands or fatigue. The apartment itself seemed to participate in her unease. She reported flickering lights, though electricians found no fault, at least 3 times. Neighbours claimed they heard pacing in her apartment when she wasn't home. One described it as measured, deliberate, like someone walking in circles. Another reported faint knocks against the shared wall, rhythmic but too slow to be plumbing. Then came the incident at the subway. A security camera shows Emily waiting on a platform, shoulders tense, clutching her bag tightly. As the train entered, its reflection stretched across the dark glass of the tunnel. For a brief frame, analysis software flagged an anomaly. Her reflection did not match her posture. Her head turned left in real life, but in the reflection it turned right. She stumbled backward, nearly falling into another commuter before boarding. Witnesses later said she looked ashen, like she had seen a ghost. Therapy notes from that month revealed the return of sleep disturbance. Dreams replayed the kitchen scene, but altered. Sometimes the man at the table lifted his head and smiled. Sometimes he whispered through clenched teeth. Her clinician documented recurring anxiety about mirrors and glass, with the recommendation to minimize reflective environments. The tension reached a peak during a late-night walk. Emily had taken to avoiding crowds, choosing side streets instead of main roads. One evening she passed a storefront long closed, its windows covered in dust. Yet she froze, because in the grimy glass, a figure sat at a table inside. The outline familiar, his chin slumped against his chest. She blinked and the chair was empty. Back home, shaken, she found her apartment exactly as she left it, except for the table. On it sat a cup, porcelain, empty, clean. But she had not taken it from the cabinet. Emily left the apartment that night and checked into a hotel 3 blocks away. The building manager, confused, later confirmed her lease was still active and rent still paid. But when staff entered to inspect, they noted nothing unusual, except for one detail in their written report. The blinds, which Emily always kept drawn, were wide open. The chapter ends on her return 2 days late. Security footage captures her unlocking the door, pausing and staring inside as though listening. She steps in, sets down her bag, and freezes. The camera outside shows her standing motionless for nearly 3 minutes before backing out into the hall. When investigators asked what she saw, Emily never gave a clear answer. She only whispered, "He was at the table again, waiting." Emily left Chicago to escape her past, but the shadows followed her. From poisoned tea to mirrored faces, the ghost of David refused to stay buried. Was it guilt, trauma, or something darker that slipped through the cracks of her escape? We may never know. But in the silence of her apartment, with a chair waiting at the table, one thing is certain. Emily's story does not end with freedom. It ends with a question. When the past knocks, can you ever truly lock the door